We're going to go ahead and get started. I want to begin with a welcome to our new members. My name is Stacey Goldring, and I am the creator of Chapter and Notes Book Discussions. I can talk about books 24/7. So you can go like this when you need to cut me off or think I need to get on task. Because this book, Barbara Kingsolver's Flight Behavior, there is so much to talk about in here, and we do not have nearly enough time. So I'm going to try to be super organized and give you a little bit of background about the characters, the plot, talk about the styles and the themes that happen, that we experience in this book. But I have to tell you something really interesting that happened in my research this go around. If you haven't put yourself on mute, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and mute, because you know me, I kind of like squirrel all over the place. So I want to listen to the echo instead of my own brain, which go figure. Okay, so because we are in the hand of such an amazing storyteller, when I was researching her bio, for those of you who have been with us, I try to go basically in a chronological order because that kind of makes sense. In Barbara's case, reading her bio and researching her bio was like reading another novel. It was the strangest thing. So I can't wait to get to this portion where we can talk about her, because it'll be a very different presentation than usual. All right, so I'm going to just go ahead and get started with you and let you know that I did not plan that Barbara Kingsolver would be coming out with a new book this month, but I would like to take all the credit, none of the blame, as Michael Scott said, and let you know that if you enjoyed this book, Demon Copperhead has just come out, which is basically David Copperfield in a double wide in Appalachia. I'm sure it's a wonderful book. I have not read it yet, but if you enjoyed this book, then you have a great treat in store. She's a prolific author, and you can read her latest. All right, so a little bit about the book. Dellarobia Turbow is 28. She is a discontented housewife. The book opens and we're running, and I'm not sure what's going on, and I'm a little bit confused, but we're running, and our boots are getting dirty, and we're very frustrated, and we need a cigarette, and we're running out in the country, up in the mountains, and all of a sudden she comes into like a miracle, like she witnesses butterflies everywhere, and it is one of those life-changing moments. She thinks it's like she doesn't even know how to process it. She doesn't even tell anyone at first because she needs to keep it like, what the heck just happened? Finally, her family finds out, the church, the community, the news, the world. And we are left to question, what is the impact of this miracle of these monarchs on her life? She is as a woman, as a mother, as a wife, on the community, on science, on our climate. What does this mean for the world? It gives you pause to understand multiple perspectives of an argument. That is the magic of Kingsolver in this book. So I want to talk about a little bit now about the characters' names. We have Dellarobia, Preston, Cordelia, Dovey or Dovey, Ovid, Byron, Cub, Bear, and Hester. She says early in the book, Dellarobia, that her name comes from like a crummy wreath. So I looked up online, Dellarobia, and indeed you can buy these wreaths. They are for sale. You can go to, it's called boysrepublic.org/Dellarobia wreaths. Perfect time. Well, nowadays it's always the perfect time for a wreath, but they're very busy right now, particularly this time of year. I also looked up the artist, Dellarobia, an Italian artist, which I'm sure many of you know about. I did not. anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. You know that I love to look into the names of characters and see if that can tell us a little bit about the story. And indeed it does in this book. Dellarobia is married to who? She is married to Cub. What is Cub's father's name? Bear. Okay, enough said there. But then we have her mother-in-law, Hester. Who is Hester? Well, I don't have a necklace with an A on it, but that gives you a little bit of an idea of who Hester is. And if you are aware of the story, then you will know already by this nod to Nathaniel Hawthorne's Scarlet Letter that there's a lot more to Hester than the crusty shell that she presents. And then I looked up the root word of Preston, and it goes back to the Old English for the priest's estate. Barbara Kingsolver is super smart and super well read. So I am thinking she probably knew this. I don't know. If she didn't, I love the meaning of the idea of a priest, of a man of the cloth, and the estate being their land or being all of our land, and the idea that it is precious, it is holy, it is sacred. Cordelia, of course, is from King Lear. She is one of the daughters from King Lear. And she, obviously you can see I don't know the story of King Lear very well. So Shakespeare is in our future because this is an embarrassment. So I will read to you from the ultimate source, Wikipedia, about Cordelia, if there's anyone else who may need to brush up a little as well. Cordelia is the fictional character from Shakespeare's King Lear. She is the youngest of three daughters and the favorite. After her father offers her an opportunity to profess her love to him in return for 1/3 of the land in the kingdom, she refuses and is banished for the majority of the play. Although Cordelia is a toddler in this book, I think that she has the feistiness of Lear's Cordelia. We have other interesting characters' names as well, such as Dellarobia's best friend. Yeah, her name is either Dovey or Dovey. People have been pronouncing it differently. When I think of a dove, peace, right? And then we have Ovid Brian. Obviously, this is a nod to Ovid and Lord Byron, and I will get to him in a minute, to both of them in a minute. And if I were, there it is. If I was better organized, I would have already had it out of my binder for you. But in case you haven't brushed up on your classics, I feel we need to, because we love books, we need to know who Ovid is as well. So Ovid lived in the Common Era from before the Common Era, from 43 to 17. I think common, uncommon, I don't know. Okay, so this is what he looked like. So you get an idea of the era. He didn't exactly take a selfie. Okay, so who was he? Well, we know he was a Roman poet who's writing, obviously this is Common Era, go figure. Okay, he's influenced Shakespeare, Dante, Chaucer, Milton, and Kingsolver. And he's been known as fluff. So this is how some people have categorized, people that study the classics, categorize him as fluff, because to a large degree, it has to do with love and relationships and things like that. But it is said that you can go ahead and look at him and read his works and get a great insight to the Augustan age. Obviously, this is Common Era. All right, so this is how we can know Ovid. I pulled some of his quotes. Courage conquers all things. It even gives strength to the body. Either do not attempt at all or go through with it. A burden which is done well becomes light. Take rest. A field that has rested gives a bountiful crop. Dripping hollows out a rock. To be loved, be lovable. Everyone is a millionaire where promises are concerned. It is often the prickly thorn that produces the tender roses. We are slow to believe that which, if believed, would hurt our feelings. Habits change into character. In our play, we reveal what kind of people we are. He who has lived in obscurity has lived well. Tell that to social media. Okay, so there's Ovid. Ovid has a last name in our book, and it is Byron. So just in case, a little fun trivia about Lord Byron. He was a leading figure in the Romantic movement. He's regarded as one of the greatest English poets, influenced everybody, blah, 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 blah. His wife came up with, because he was so popular in the day, and he lived from 1788 to 1824, because he was so popular in the day, his wife coined a term for this hysteria about her husband, Byron mania. So Beatlemania, that was already old school. That was used already. So I thought that was very cute. So his poems, a little intense. So I'm just going to go ahead again and pull out some fun quotes for you. Always laugh when you can. It's cheap medicine. A man's love is of man's life. It is a woman's whole existence. In her first passion, a woman loves her lover. In all others, all she loves is the love. So we have a therapist with us in the group. I'm sure we could analyze that forever. Adversity is the first path to truth. Okay, this is beautiful. Listen. Love will find a way through paths where wolves fear to prey. So now, if you signed off right now, you would know about Byron mania, you would know about Ovid, and you would know all about Byron. So I think right there, thank you, Barbara Kingsolver, right? All right, so we have a lot more, though, than that to get over. You have read a book that is of a certain genre, and that genre is called cli-fi. I'm going to repeat it. Cli-fi, climate fiction. This term came into use in the 2010s, and it has been a topic of fiction throughout the 20th century. If you have read J.G. Ballard or Margaret Atwood, then you are familiar with cli-fi. It deals with climate change, global warming, and includes dystopian, utopian themes and imagining futures based on our response to climate change today. It includes climate engineering, climate adaptation, etc. It is distinct from, wait for it, petrofiction. This is a thing. Petrofiction deals directly with the petroleum industry. I mean, everyone now can create their own genre, I guess. I thought historical fiction was getting a little too, fancy. But okay, so now we know about cli-fi and petrofiction. Why does this book fit into the cli-fi category? Obviously, we are dealing with climate change and the distinction of species and habitat destruction, right? But the book is rather thick, and it contains more than that. Kingsolver, through Dellarobia's journey, presents religion, science, poverty, wealth, education, instinct versus faith versus silence, intolerance, acceptance, etc. It's complex, it's well observed, it lent itself to a lot of me marking it up. I needed like colors for my categories: biology, literary. There was so much going on in here. But let's look at the obvious right now. Dealing with the lepidopterist, Ovid, he says early on, for God's sake, the damn globe is catching fire and the islands are drowning. The evidence is staring you in the face. This is Clyde, right? Dellarobia says at one point, I think people are scared to face up to a bad outcome. That's just human. Like not going to the doctor when you found a lump. If fight or flight is the choice, it is way easier to fly. Dellarobia and her community present to us and make real the practicality and the luxury some of us have to be environmentally conscious and make environmental choices good for the environment, because perhaps our choices don't depend on paying the mortgage and paying back loans to the bank, which is why we have the character of Bear and what he represents in the book. All right. The style. This is written in a very conversational way, yet there's a lot of description. There's a lot of science. She makes each side of the climate change issue and the reason why people have reacted to it the way they have understandable. She makes these people real. And that's a beautiful talent. And in my research for the book, and it may have even been in the back because there is an interview in the copy that I have, she says she wants to be an ambassador to connect and be a bridge to the rural and the urban. I think that's beautiful. All right, so she was asked in the at the back of the book. She was asked at the back of the book, do you see yourself as an activist? Do you see yourself as political? And here is how she answers. I think of activism as a simple action meant to secure a specific result. And for this purpose, I go to board meetings. I vote. I donate money. I occasionally fire off an op-ed. But that's not what I do for a living. Writing literature is so much more nuanced than these things. It's like comparing chopping vegetables to neurosurgery. Literature is one of the few kinds of writing in the world that does not tell you what to buy, want, see, be, believe in. It's more like a conversation, raising new questions and inspiring you to answer them for yourself. As a literary novelist, get ready for this. I spend my days tasting the insides of words, breathing life into sentences that swim away under their own power, stringing together cables of poetry to hold up a narrative arc. I hope to be a fearless writer, examining the unexamined life and asking the unasked questions in most parts of the world. People call this literature. For some reason, people in the US are fond of putting me in a box labeled political, which could mean anything. This is about the world. This makes me uncomfortable. If it means inclined to change people's minds, that seems so ludicrous and uncomfortable. Ludicrous and uncomfortable, because great literature will do that. Fiction cultivates empathy for a theoretical stranger by putting you inside his head, allowing you to experience life from his point of view. This is why you can feel sympathy for Hester or for Bear. It can broaden your view of gender, ethnicity, place, time, power, vulnerability, things that influence social interaction. I think the novelist's duty is to own up to the power of the craft and use it wisely. I'm going to talk a little bit now about her life, and then we're going to open it up to discussion. So people ask, is your book autobiographical? And she answers, not at all. The plots are not my life. Those characters are not people I know, and none of them is me. My job is to invent lives that are far more enlightening than my own. And that's the whole advantage of fiction over life. You get to control the outcome. And I can't base fiction on my life because I don't build a story on pre-existing conditions. I begin by considering a theme. I create a world in which the right questions will be asked, and then I populate my settings with these characters who serve as plot. Those characters are my slaves. They must do exactly what I want or the story falls to pieces. No actual person I know is that cooperative. So I invent people from scratch. Once a reader, a psychologist wrote, "Come on now, how can you claim you're not writing about yourself?" And she says, yikes. Did I move from Kentucky to Arizona like a character in a previous book? Yes, but via France. Did someone leave an abandoned child in my car along the way? No. Does my fiction reflect my worldview? Probably, but I have not done a fraction of the things my characters do, such as running from the law, adopting an abused child, being an expert cockfighter, having Alzheimer's, being a gay man, being a straight man, being the child of a Christian missionary, cooking for Diego Rivera, having great sex under a ruin. Do I seem that energetic? Okay. Her favorite authors. I'm not going to list them because it's basically all the good authors she likes. What is she reading lately? She is turning to poetry. She is turning to Emily Dixon and the beloved Mary Oliver. All right. Barbara Kingsolver has an excellent website. So I used it as a resource. And this is what she says about biographies. Prolonged self-revelation seems discourteous to me, and self-aggrandizing is vulgar. Among the worst things I commonly heard people say about a woman in my childhood was that she was parading herself around. But I understand for many people, art inspires curiosity about the artist, and Wikipedia abhors a vacuum, others gladly filling in the biographical details that I decline to offer myself. So I provide here my own version of the Barbara Kingsolver story. Can you see how much fun I had researching this? This was so great. I have drawn excerpts from this brief Barbara Kingsolver story to share with you. If I say her, it's because she said my. If I say Barbara, she said I. So I'm kind of just pulling excerpts, but I encourage you to read the entire autobiography. It's barbarakingsolver.com because it's really beautiful. So we're going to go by eras of her life, and I'm going to start you off with childhood, a diary, and a key, 1955, 1972. She was born in 95 in Annapolis, and then her parents moved to Eastern Kentucky. Reading was encouraged in the family. Being outside was encouraged. There was no supervision. Critters were welcome in her home. They kept a snapping turtle for months in a large pickle jar, and today she is very sorry about that. She kept a journal beginning at age 8. It was a small red diary with a tiny lock. Quote, I could hardly contain all my adjectives, unquote. Her first published work, Why We Need a New Elementary School, because there was falling plaster in her school. She credits this work as teaching her that the pen is pencil is a mighty tool. Throughout childhood, she lived in several countries because her father was a doctor who donated his medical services. If you've read Poisonwood Bible, this may sound familiar to you, because in 1963, that's exactly where they went, the Republic of Congo. These stints away from home were double-edged, giving a sense of the world and an uneasy status as an outsider in a peer group that valued conformity. So she says she survived the standard adolescent miseries with marching band, piano practice, good novels, and journaling. So now we jump forward to 73 to 85. She entitles this, Seeking My Fortune. In 73, she gets a scholarship, a piano scholarship to DePaul University. But there, she changes her major to biology. She supports herself as an art class model, typist, house cleaner, typesetter, and she nurtures a private passion for writing. But claiming herself as an author, she said, would have seemed starry-eyed, like calling herself a concert pianist, a movie star, people who can fly. After graduation, she goes to France and England on archaeological digs. By the time her visa expires, she says she had accumulated notebooks of poems and stories, but no fortune. 78, she returns home, moves to Tucson, and works as a lab tech at the University of Arizona Medical School. Then she enters as a grad student to study theoretical population genetics. Okay, so she continues to write poetry and fiction, but she doesn't tell anyone because she doesn't want to be seen as unserious. She receives her master's, but before finishing her dissertation, she takes a job as a scientific writer for the university. So she's doing like the worst writing genre ever on earth, which is grant writing, trust me, and also reporting on research news. After hours, she would freelance for newspapers and magazines, and she would branch beyond science. She covered the arts, and she got into investigative journalism. 1985 is the year of the big decision. Her freelance gigs were steady enough that she walks away from the job with benefits. Her first year as a freelancer, she earns $6,000 and learns to live on it. And she says she never looks back. She marries Joe Hoffman, a chemist, and they work to investigate human rights violations on the border and support Latin American refugees that are seeking asylum. Here's what she writes about that time. I had come to the Southwest expecting cactus, wide open spaces, and adventure. I found instead another whole America. This desert that burned with raw beauty had a great fence built across it, attempting to divide north from south. I stumbled upon a borderland where people perished of heat by day and cold hostility by night. 1985 to 1994, she entitles A Wholly Unexpected Life. She begins publishing poems and short fictions. She's still working journalism gigs. She writes a book called Holding the Line, Women in the Great Arizona Mine Strike. And then she goes to the library and looks up how to find an agent. And she finds an agent who tries for a year to find a publisher for this book, but has no luck. At this time, she is embarrassed to tell her agent that she's working on a novel. The title, The Bean Trees. She says she wrote this book during insomniatic nights during her first pregnancy at a desk inside a closet, not to disturb her sleeping husband in their one-room house. In 1987, before her daughter Camille is born, she gets into the mood, and we know this mood, the extreme house cleaning mood. I'm going to clean. She takes this manuscript. Does she bin it or does she send it to New York? Well, thank God we know what she did. So she includes a note with the manuscript to the publisher, and it says, I'm sorry, you probably don't want this. I think it's a novel. Immediately, a publisher is found, and today The Bean Trees is translated into several dozen languages. I highly recommend this title. So she says she is found living a wholly unexpected life. She's a full-time author. She learns to type one-handed while nursing Camille. In 1990, she publishes Homeland, and then a second novel comes out, Animal Dreams. In 91, she moves to the Canary Islands. In 93, the entire family gets very sick, and she gets a divorce. Then she publishes Pigs in Heaven. She says of that year, it was one of those years in which best and worst do not equal average. 1994 to 2004, opportunity knocks. She writes 5 more books. High Tide in Tucson, Poisonwood Bible, Prodigal Summer, Small Wonders. These may sound familiar to you. She also becomes an editor for the Best American Short Stories. She writes for newspapers, magazines. She publishes a book with National Geographic. She plays with the Rock Bottom Remainders. This is a rock band that includes Stephen King, Steve Barry, Jimmy Buffett. Then she gets the call from Oprah for Poisonwood Bible. She joins the usage review panel for the American Heritage Dictionary. Quote, one of my kids learned early that any playground shouting match over my parent is tougher than yours could be ground to a halt with my mom writes for the dictionary. She has difficulty adjusting to fame. So what does she do? She establishes the Bellwether Prize for first-time novelists. She almost refuses a fellowship because she's a single parent, and this fellowship required a residency program in another state. So she negotiates a shorter residency closer to Kentucky so the family can help with the babysitting. She gives lectures at Emory and Henry College, and she ends up marrying biology professor Stephen Hopp. Another daughter is born in 96. They spend the next 7 summers living in a log cabin on Stephen's farm. And then during the school year, they go back to Tucson for the girls. The next portion of her life is called The Landscape of Home. And this is 2004 to 2010. One daughter finishes high school, the other completes grade 2. They move back to Virginia. They remodel a 100-year-old farmhouse, renovate the fields and orchards, and establish flocks of poultry and Icelandic sheep. She writes a screen adaptation for Poisonwood Bible that is on contract. I haven't heard much about it since. She breaks several crucial bones while on an assignment in South America and spends the next year relearning how to walk. So she begins 2 new books. Animal Vegetable Miracle, A Year in the Life of Food, is published in 2007. The Lacuna comes out in 2009. She contemplated this title for decades. If you have not read the book, I highly recommend it. It took years of research in libraries, archives, jungles, museums, Mexico, and the US. She said it was the hardest work she had yet written. 2010 to present. She calls this finding my place again. Happily settled on her farm in Appalachia, she feels unsettled by certain new ways in our world. She senses mistrust between city and rural and identifies with both sides. This is what she says. With these cultural rifts deepening into canyons, one issue preoccupied me: climate change. Many of my farming neighbors didn't believe in it, even as we watched our crops destroyed by new, unpredictable weather patterns. Why was the naming so hard? For me, a novel always begins with a big question, and I knew I'd found my next big one. How can people look at the same evidence and come away with entirely different conclusions? How does the human brain decide what to believe? My search for answers, or at least a useful story, took me through the annals of psychology, physics, biology, and ultimately to the wintering grounds of the monarch butterfly in the high Sierra Madres of Mexico. The novel Flight Behavior, set in southern Appalachia, works through this complex rural and urban perspectives on science, religion, climate change, globalization, and yes, how people decide what to believe in. What does she say about the reaction to our book? I was happy with the novel and the conversations it launched, but the world felt no more settled to me. In fact, the 20 teens felt like the end of the world as I knew it. So many physical and civic shelters I had taken for granted, environmental, economic, political, suddenly seemed to be falling apart. Things a lot of us had counted on were disappearing fast. The certainty of a job, a pension at the end of one's life, even the very ice on the poles and the fish in the sea. What do we do when the rules we've always followed no longer seem to apply? That question brought her to her next book, Unsheltered. In 2020, she published How to Fly in 10,000 Easy Lessons, poems examining the ties that bind us to one another and the world beyond ourselves. Today, she says she is comfortable with her unusual position in the universe. She's a literary writer trained as a biologist, a rural agrarian advocate working in an overwhelming urban-based, urban represented field. She's living in the red end of a blue state. She's working with both she says, my head and my hands devoted to science, faith, family, tradition, and progressive social change. This is what she says. I kept my writing a secret for more than 20 years because it seemed an indulgent passion, and I am well aware of the risk and luck that have crossed my path at important turns. I could have stayed on a payroll instead of hazarding the precarious economics of freelance writing. Later on, because I felt swamped as a single mother trying to make ends meet, I nearly declined the writing fellowship that led me to my husband. And I came within about 6 inches of discarding my first novel rather than bother anyone to read it. Now, every time I begin a new book, I wonder again who will follow me down these roads to ask these hard questions that draw me in. And still, readers do. And that is the best luck of all. That's a little bit about Barbara Kingsolver. I am eager to discuss this book with you, to talk about the butterflies, the migration, etc. And right now, I'm going to open it up to questions. So please unmute yourself because I need to know what you thought of this book.
Okay,
So,
I'll start.
yeah, please start.
The book was fascinating in the fact that she discovers these butterflies in their miraculous new setting and keeps her from doing that bad, sinful thing she was looking for. A little excitement on the side. But what really was interesting about the book was the butterflies and the doctor who comes in to study them.
Yeah.
The mother-in-law, I think, I can't remember, the mother-in-law who says, hey, I'll get a few tourists up that way and make a few bucks on the side. And what the butterflies came to represent for different people within the community.
Well said. Well said. Diana? Unmute. Well, okay, go ahead, Diana.
Yeah. Okay, well, I have this long love relationship with Barbara Kingsolver. Someone handed me the Poisonwood Bible like 15 years ago, and after that I had to read everything she published. And what is so extraordinary about her that you fall in love with her characters because she makes them so empathetic. There isn't a nasty streak in Dellarobia, no matter what she wants to do or has to do or is forced to do in her Appalachian poverty situation. She's never nasty. She's never mean. And Kingsolver manages that in all of her books. We don't find that there is that much evil in the world. We just fall in love with her people, and she makes them part of the regional. She's very regional. All of her books are based on a particular location, and the way she introduces this location to us is amazing. I mean, in the Poison Bible, it's the Congo. In some of her Arizona books, it's the desert and its inhabitants, and then she moves to Appalachia and it's in Virginia, and she makes us so comfortable falling in love with that region of the United States, and so I just love everything she's written. There are some critics who say, well, she's going overboard with being overly political, like an Unsheltered, which I think is one of the few I haven't read. But I don't find that as a drawback, that she makes us aware of situations where people like Dellarobia, I mean, she's never been to a store where she buys a new thing. She's always forced to go secondhand buying for herself. When she falls in love with those boots that she ruins on the way up the mountain, she says, I cried when I found them because they were so beautiful. So she has this love of beauty. And that's why she immediately recognizes that those butterflies are very, very special. So I don't want to dominate the conversation.
No, beautiful. And it's Poisonwood Bible, just so if anyone wants to look it up. And that was also my first introduction. And then I went back and read some of her earlier work. Phyllis, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
We just made a trip to Kentucky to visit our son and his wife and our grandchildren. And this book was with me every mile of that trip.
Wow.
Absolutely, as we drove through the Blue Ridge and the Appalachians and the Smokies. And I mean, it was just there. And I look up into the mountains and at the trees and I think, oh my God, this is where she is, you know, and this is what's happening there. It was just with me all the time.
That's a very
unbelievable
feeling. That's a very feeling.
Yeah. My own roots are in the foothills of the Blue Ridge. My mother's family, the ancestors, were from around Stanton. And I will tell you, no, in Virginia.
Oh, okay. Stanton,
And I
Virginia.
will tell you that names like Preston and Cordelia run in my family, and they were interesting names, and they were old names from that area.
That's so interesting.
And they travel way back. There were Burtons, there were Custuses, that was Martha Washington, and they were all related.
Wow. I wonder if there's a Scottish roots in that.
They were Scottish, they were Irish, and they were English.
Wow, beautiful. Several years ago, we were taking a road trip out west, and I was reading Angle of Repose by Wallace Stegner, which, if you have not yet read that book, immediately after we are done, you have to run.
They'll get that.
You have to run and go buy that book because it's an amazing book. But anyway, it was one of those meta experiences where you're driving and you're seeing the character of the environment from the book.
That happened to me once before when we were driving along the coast in California, and I was reading Steinbeck.
Oh my God, that's amazing. That's amazing. You know,
but that's the only other time that's really happened to me.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Martha, what'd you think of the book?
You know, I started it and I kind of put it down because I'd never heard of her, and I'm going, I have like 5 other book groups, and this is like the beginning of the year, and I'm in a mess. Okay, but then I got it again because it drew me back again. The idea of the milkweed and the monarchs and the migration of the, and so I just kind of like started it again. I with my grandchildren, I was raising the monarchs for a while in Miami. And then the part in there where Preston's friend comes over with his family.
Josephina and Lupe and
correct.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of got me too. But totally, when you're talking about Barbara Kingsolver, that is almost like a novel in itself. I mean, you just presented, I was like off the wall because seriously, it's just the American, what's happening right now. And then I look at it and it's 2012. And we know that the climate situation has been happening 50 years, and when are we really going to figure this out as the storm is approaching? So that's where I am.
I was intrigued by the title of the book.
Because
flight behavior, because the old saying is it flight or is it fright? Which do you choose? And that's what she does in the end, really. Because she moves.
Well, can we talk about the end? And I apologize. Well, first, wait, I want to talk about the end. So someone please remember that, because I will surely get distracted. But I would like anyone else who would like to share. Kathy, go ahead and unmute if you'd like. Stallman, West, Maryland, if you'd like to unmute after Kathy and say something, that's great. Tell us what you thought of the, tell us what you thought, Kath.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I feel like when I read her that I can't stop reading her. I'm like, so every moment. So what happened is I started reading it, and then I had a lot of other things going on. So I decided I would listen to it while I was doing some other things. So which I typically don't do. I typically read, but this one I did. And I'm not sure if because I did it in that audio version, I absolutely hung on every word. When you hear them spoken, as well as hear the content of what she's communicating, it's just joyful. It really, really is. I loved, and you said you want to talk about the ending, so it's interesting. What I wanted to talk about was the ending. I loved that the way Barbara gave us the ending was Dellarobia talking to Preston. I loved that she didn't just tie it up with all the ribbons and bows. She gave us enough so we understood what the transition was going to be, but she made this a way to explain to a child that his life was going to change because her life was going to change. And that, to me, I just thought that was a wonderful way to, because this book was a combination of like childhood fantasy with the butterflies and the there was a whole part of as she said, there was a fascination with nature that as a child we are so naturally attached to, but in our adult life we get busy with other things. We forget about, we see a butterfly and we don't think about, we take it for granted. We take the world around us for granted, the world of nature, and I think that's part of the apathy with climate change. We just take the trees and the flowers and the bees and we just think they're always going to be here, and we don't even pay attention to them. So I love her, by the way, and I love that you gave us her story. When you were talking, I put it her website, and I was already, fascinated with reading, and even just the first lines. First of all, she's a gifted writer. I mean, she puts words together, and you're like, oh my God, how does she do that? But what I would say too is that the passion for these topics that she takes on is so courageous. I mean, I give her as a person and as a writer, and as a person who put herself, she puts herself into a really, I'd say, current and ongoing dilemma. How do we develop, kind of bear versus, the butterflies,
Right.
how do we do this? How do we keep nature without and have progress?
Exactly. Well, thank you. It is a question it's an ambient question as we turn every page. Stallman West, please go ahead and welcome to our community of reading.
Thank you. My first name's Teresa. I don't know why the last name is showing up.
Hi, Teresa.
This is my first Barbara Kingsolver book, and so I will read more of her.
Yay!
Some of the things you mentioned sounded interesting. I was really attracted to the science background she has, and that's in the book because that's my background. But I'm glad Kathy mentioned the ending, because about 3/4 the way in, or when she starts talking to her husband about their marriage, I was thinking to myself, I hope this doesn't end with her just staying in the same place, because I would have been very disappointed if that had happened. So, because I think in some ways she did love her husband, but they were so different. And obviously the reason they got together was because of the pregnancy. So I was so glad at the end that it ended the way it did, because otherwise I would have been mad and I would have said, I'm never reading another one of her books. So I did appreciate the way she ended it.
Okay. So. I appreciate that.
Because to me, it felt like she really needed to move on and move on with her life, because it could be so much more than it was.
But this is my question to you, to Teresa, and I'll put it out to the group. Then we'll get to you, Sue Ann. I'm not sure what happened at the end. And I felt like all of a sudden I was entering like a Ishiguro novel or a David Mitchell or Ian McEwan, where I'm still not sure what happened at the end of Atonement. But it's like, does she live? Does she die? And I had no idea about Hester. That was a bombshell, because obviously I need to become more well-read. And the flood, I did not see this coming. Usually you can pick up on certain clues. I missed both. And these were huge. I mean, it's okay. she doesn't want you to know what's coming next. But do you believe, Teresa, that she lived?
Yeah, I had some question about that too. I
Okay.
don't know if it was totally clear in the book, and maybe I need to go back and reread that. But still, the fact that she, even if she didn't live, which I
Right.
hope she did,
Right.
the fact that she had made that decision was satisfying to me.
Okay. So it really, it doesn't matter because she was on the right path.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Sue-Ann?
Well, what I was going to say is, as I started to read the book,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking of flight behavior.
Yes.
And where do we see her at the very beginning of the story is in flight.
Yes.
She's headed somewhere away from the farm and into what she hopes is going to be something more exciting.
Yes.
And then you get that double image with the butterflies who all of a sudden have been programmed for Mexico forever. How they all end up in this community. And so I just thought the title, Flight Behavior, becomes interesting within the character as well as the bees.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Does anyone else feel that, was everyone else clear on the ending? Or did you, you were clear? And Diana, unmute. Does she live? Let me know if you think she lives. Does she die? Like, I'm not.
I can't remember the ending for myself.
Pardon me?
Yeah, she,
Go ahead, Diana.
yes, well, she absolutely deserves a life. Although she's modest and she loves her husband and knows exactly that they're very mismatched, but in this society people bear, they suffer, they continue in spite of it all. And so it was very open until the end, but I rooted for her that she used the scientists to create a path for her out of this, to go to community college, get her degree,
Yeah.
Have a career of sorts, and live her full potential. It's very good.
Okay. All right. As Kathy.
I wish.
Wait,
Oh, sorry.
Kathy and Phyllis.
Okay. All right. So my observation about the ending was that she gave us an ending without an answer. And I think to me it was a metaphor for climate change. That we're sitting at a point where there's a flood and a fire. And we don't know what's the outcome, whether we're going to kill the environment, and kill the planet that we live on, or whether we're going to find a way to keep it alive and to bring it into another state of being. And I think that's what she did with Dellarobia. She put her right at that. I mean, I didn't think it gave you a clarity as to whether she lived or died. I just thought it left you with that question. And I thought to myself, well, that's what she's trying to say in this book. And the part about Dellarobia making the decision to go to college and to leave, I had that same question. Was she going to divorce him? That sort of thing. But then I thought, you know what? Really, the book was about a woman finding a way to own who she was. And once she did that, it sort of came to a conclusion for me.
Yeah. Okay. Phyllis.
It never occurred to me that she wouldn't live. Maybe it's the eternal optimist, but she was like those few butterflies that survived and flew off.
Okay.
And that's what she did. She would have flown off onto this new chapter of her life.
Wow. Her writing style made me feel like I definitely was right there with she and Cub when they were discussing basically, they're doing a postmortem on their marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right there. I mean, wondering whether they have enough money to go to the dairy freeze and splurge. It's so, she makes it so real in very plain language. She creates almost like a lace. It's like lace, this nuance. It's so beautiful.
Well, she dissects it all.
Yeah. And there were 128 characters in this book.
Oh my God. Can we talk about Hester's long lost son?
Yes. Did anyone see that coming? Did anyone see that coming?
No.
Maybe very near the reveal, but not too much before.
Because I thought that he represented for once, a man of the cloth was presented in an incredibly positive way. I'm muting everyone. It's nothing personal. I'm just getting feedback. So he seemed like a good guy and a peacemaker, as opposed to a firebrand. He was such a hopeful character to me because faith, people are very skeptical of faith, or they totally either on one side or the other. And she created a young guy who was like the peacemaker in the community. I never, ever in a million years thought that he was Hester's son. Never, 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 never. It just completely floored me. There are so many beautiful quotes in the book, but I just want to pull out a few and share them with you. This is page 462, Hester to Dellarobia. A flock is nothing but the put together of all your past choices.
Yeah.
She about explaining Cub's personality. Cub retreated to the familiar grounds of remorse and insufficiency, the terms of his existence ratified by marriage. He could construct defeat from any available material and live inside it. But for once, Dellarobia didn't go there. She was going ahead. And then explaining to Preston, there's some kind of juice in our brains that makes us only care about what is in front of us at this minute. Even if we know something different will happen later, and we should think about that too. If I could teach you one thing, Preston, that's it. Think about what's coming at you later on. Now, this is like the opposite of not in my backyard. There's a lot to be said in this book about, I hesitate to even use the word journalism anymore. I will just say media. Because there is one character, although we can sympathize with her, I think we can all agree she's incredibly irritating. And that was Tina Altner, the news reporter. She had a job to do, and she was going to do it. But that she wanted to set the shots and set the scenes. I mean, it's one thing to edit a story. It's another when you're basically doing like your own puzzle, your own free artwork. It was very easy for me because there was no one I could not like. She was the closest thing to a protagonist that I had. So I thought that she was a very interesting character. And and Ovid says to her, even the most recalcitrant climate scientists agree now the place is heating up pretty much every one of the lot, unless some other outcome is written on the subject line of his paycheck. If you were here to get information, Tina, you would not be standing in my laboratory telling me what scientists think. So journalism, media no longer reports the story, it creates the story, or it opinionates the story. And I thought that was incredibly, incredibly powerful.
I didn't think that Hester was a particularly likable character.
No, you're right. No. And P.S., I would have taken that chifforobe that was in the bedroom. It was described beautifully. And I felt bad that I did not have an opportunity to get my truck and go over there and throw it in the back of my pickup. I want that on the record. Okay, about the news. This is Dellarobia talking to her husband about the news and who we turn to and who we believe in and trust to make a decision. She says, nobody truly decided for themselves. It was too much information. But what they actually did was scope around, decide who was looking out for their clan, and then sign up for those memos in just a wide array of topics. So it's like, I'm going to believe this person and this thing, and that is going to be my world. And we can do that now because of technology. And she says, in a world of wars and religious fracas, prosperity might be the sole point of general agreement. Honestly, if you waved a handful of money, whose head wouldn't turn toward it? Only those could turn away who had already paid off their house, was her guess. You know, there's that man who's handing out leaflets, and she goes up there. Remember him? And he's like, you know, it's 10 things you can do to save the environment. And every one of them, she's like, yeah, we are. I buy everything used, or I'm not worried about getting on a flight that's going to make less of a carbon imprint. Like, she just is bringing to light the huge dichotomy between, you know, how we survive and what we think is important to survive. And the whole idea of logging that land to pay the bills, you know, if someone just says that to you, well, that's a horrible thing to do. But Kingsolver allows us to understand the heavy weight on the shoulders of Bear, you know, to pay the bills. Okay.
Did anybody else enjoy the humor in this writing? I mean, it is sometimes laughing out loud, and the dichotomy between her life in poverty and the dictum, you should fly less because you need to conserve the environment. You know, that's hilarious. And she's so good at that. The way, and she doesn't draw caricatures. I mean, her husband Cub she draws him well, but he's not a caricature of the hillbilly from Appalachia. He's just one of the people who live there, and so are her children and her friend and the scenery of her high school, the time that she went to high school with Dubby. Yeah. And those things come alive, and sometimes they're so funny. They're wonderful.
I agree.
I think the sheep represent that part of it.
Yeah.
Oh, let's talk about the sheep. I love when she has to help that, is it a ewe, give birth, and that completely like that was like a Zora Neale Hurston episode. Yeah. Like, I mean, I was riveted. And what this baby represented, is that a lamb? Yeah. Sorry. Hello.
Live on a farm much?
Okay, I just revealed way too much than I ever wanted to reveal. Right there, you saw it. Representing her lost child, and just we're going to save. It represented so much more than just saving it, and retreating to folk medicine, which really isn't folk medicine, because she read about the method in a book with her son, and it just tying that all together so beautifully. This is Kingsolver, and this is Kingsolver in every one of her books. It's really, really fascinating. I promised I would talk about the butterflies. So I want to talk a little bit about the butterflies and let you know, first of all, don't feel bad. Because if you're like me, you may have one or two or way too many milkweed plants in your yard. And chances are these are the wrong milkweed. These are the milkweed that carry the parasite that our Dellarobia is studying under the microscope that lodge whatever in the actual fiber of the wings and will the EO parasite, I believe it's called. And this is, here's my high technology for today's meeting. This is what happens when, if you can see what happens, it's a crumpled up wing. It's a deformed wing that emerges and the butterfly cannot survive. We want the butterfly to look more like this, right? But it ends up, unfortunately, looking like this. So here's the problem with buying milkweed from a commercial nursery. They treat the milkweed, first of all, they're treating it with herbicides that that make it less than healthy to begin with. You're passing on the parasite. It is not native to Florida, even though it may say Florida friendly. It is not native. You have to be as careful about your milkweed as you are. Why is there a line there? What is going on? As when you are buying your vegetables. Like you have to know, like I look at where it's, from where it's shipped. Anyway, that's how you have to look at buying plants for your yard. On the website, there is a link, chapterandnotes.com. I've provided a link for you where if you live in Florida, there are a link to local native nurseries where you can source native milkweed. This is not the invasive that if you have it in your yard, as hard as it is, I would ask you to pull it up and destroy it. Now, I say that to you with full disclosure that if you walk 20 feet out this door, I have a very tiny little greenhouse. And in that greenhouse, I have a picture. I should take a picture for you. I have 2 glass jars. One says bad milkweed. One says good milkweed, because I feel so bad throwing out the bad milkweed because I figure, well, I've been feeding them like, Doritos instead of a salad. Like maybe some of them will end up healthy. Like I feel so bad getting completely rid of what looks like a perfectly healthy plant, but I know I have to do it. So this is baby steps. So everything now is out of the yard and it's in the greenhouse so no one will notice it because we don't want any butterflies still feeding here because their metabolism needs to slow down because they need to be, they need to leave here. They don't need to be laying eggs or anything like that. They need to leave here, but not go to Mexico. Because if you're living in Florida, our native population, just like they go to Boca or they're going to go to the Keys, they don't need to go down here because it's about the right temperature climate for them to winter in South Florida. Okay. If you live if you live west of the Rockies, like Kathy, there are certain places along the coast where there are eucalyptus and cypress trees that are native to your community where they will all go. It is this area in the middle. Where they are going down to the Sierra Madres. Okay. This is where they are going. So Texas is this great, pass through. They're coming all the way from Canada and they're going down here to winter, to lay low. So I hope that, kind of gives you a greater picture now of the migration. Okay. So listen to this. They're driven obviously by seasonal changes. The length of day and the temperature influence their movements. The monarch travels much faster than all other tropical butterflies, up to 3,000 miles en masse to their winter roots, often in the same exact trees. Like birds or whales, they migrate, but they're only going to make the trip once. Okay. So it's the children's grandchildren that are going to return the following fall. So other species of Lepidoptera, butterflies and moths, also travel long distances, but they'll only go in one direction following the food, and that's called emigration. When we see the butterflies in our environment, first of all, just drop to your knees and give praise and thank whatever the greater power is in your world, because this population has been cut down by 97%. Okay. They're basically loners. They're hanging out by themselves. When you see two butterflies together, there's only one or two things happening. We are either getting ready to mate, or we are fighting over territory, and meaning a nectar source. And usually you'll see a vertical thing happening, okay? They only cluster at night when going south. They're cold-blooded, unable to fly in cold weather. And this is why if you live in a climate that has freezes, you got to get rid of that milkweed in the fall. All right. So there's a lot more about this that actually, I don't want to go into too much detail, but they actually gain X amount of weight when they begin the migration. And then they know how much to eat to beef up in order to have enough energy to get where they need to go. But they don't know everything yet about the monarch. There's still a lot of mysteries out there, which makes them such an incredible, incredible creature. Now, if your bifocals are working, you can actually tell the difference, or if you have like zoom on your phone, like a really fine zoom, and you can get a picture of the butterfly. I want to be able to show you that the very high technology I'm using today, which is a printed sheet of paper, but the male butterfly has those two dots. The female in the picture above does not. This is how you'll tell your male from your female. There is a picture of a male and female on the back, so you can see that. And if you really have eyes of like a 10-year-old, you can even see the dot here on the male wing on the underside. Okay. So that's a little background on that. There are beautiful images online of when these butterflies are roosting. A lot of people vacation and will go to the Sierra Madres or certain places in California to witness this beautiful, miraculous event. So that's a little bit more about monarchs.
You know what, Stacey? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
You're not.
But it's fascinating to think about the salmon who knows how to spawn back up to wherever. The monarch's not exclusive, but that thing that is built into certain animals, insects, whatever, that allows them to return to these same exact trees or spawning grounds or whatever, certainly has to be one of nature's greatest secrets.
So you're literally making my heart pound so hard when you say that, because I could talk forever about the fine engineering of animals, like they are such, and trees, and how there is this amazing, they're beyond amazing inventions. If you live in Florida, Florida is home to a native tortoise called the gopher tortoise. The gopher tortoise habitat is being completely obliterated because of all the building in Florida. So what people are doing with great intent for mitigation for these construction companies in order to build on native lands and destroy everything, they do mitigation. So they hire companies to come out and find the gopher tortoises and put them somewhere else. Well, let me tell you something. First of all, the gopher tortoise is considered a keystone species, and these are species of plants and animals. Keystone meaning that if you have this is like a supporting animal that will lead to all these other animals and plants thriving. The gopher tortoise alone is a keystone for over 1,000 other species of animals. If you have a gopher tortoise, it can support that community for a variety of reasons. However, getting to Sue Ann's point, the gopher tortoise has a GPS that's better than all of our phones, because wherever you put it, it is programmed to go back home. Just like the loggerhead turtle on the coast knows to follow the moonlight to get to the ocean, the same goes for the gopher tortoise. People are, with the best of intent, rescuing these tortoises, but they are going to, if they're in captivity, they're obviously going to be tortured because all they want to do is eat and go home. And they want to get back to their native grounds, which is now a Target or a swimming pool, or a doctor's office or whatever. So yes, animals are amazing, amazing creatures. I agree with you, Sue Ann. And the same goes obviously for every.
The mystery of the butterfly is that these are not the same butterflies going back.
Exactly. Isn't that amazing?
So how does that information pass?
Well, Carl Jung would say the collective unconscious, right, Kathy? But in this case, but I don't know. And that's what they're trying to figure out. But isn't it just, you're just in awe. And for every butterfly, that particular butterfly has one plant that it needs to be its host. It has one plant that serves as its food source. It's so there. You can't just thrive on like one thing. It's a whole network of a community that. I'll give you another example, completely unrelated, because now here we go. The native rosemary. The plant. So it grows in kind of dry environments. And you can actually find beautiful native rosemary if you go behind Regency Mall here in Jacksonville. By the way, Regency Mall was built on an old titanium mine, but that's a story for another time. Native rosemary will give off an oil. So when its babies, Teresa's nodding her head, she knows this. So when the new plants come up next to it, the oil is toxic to other animals to eat its leaves or, destroy the plant. So the oils that are emitted from that mother plant protect the baby plants as they are growing. Like an iron dome for rosemary. Like how incredible. This is nature. And this is the gift that Barbara Kingsolver gives us with this book is you can be a part. Someone once told me, and it was very good advice. They said, Stacey, you cannot boil an ocean. And I took that advice. And to continue with the cliches, I now stay in my own lane. With that in mind, you can do your part, whether it's a plant on a pot sitting on your windowsill overlooking an urban environment or the ocean, or whether you have land up the wazoo, you can do your part. All you need to do is get in touch with your native plant society in your area. There's something called Monarch Watch out of Kansas University or University of Kansas, where they have been monitoring the monarchs' migration that we discussed in the middle for over 30 years. They do great work. And all of this is on the link I put on our website, where you can click on that, and it has these links where you can go to other local foundation, local societies that can help you be a part of the solution. If you're not familiar with Doug Tallamy, he's kind of like the Moses of nature right now. And he's written several books. He's he's a professor at the University of Delaware. He has written several books about your role, and he has a whole homegrown, let's be a part of your own background network to bring natives into your world. So I feel like I'm proselytizing, and I am, because full disclosure, I'm also a University of Florida IFAS naturalist. So I've studied this, and I'm passionate about natives, flora, fauna, culture, all of that. And this book brings that all together with great literature. Like, how great is this book? This is like, if you're on a desert island, you take this book. I also wanted to show you because I have too many, so I only brought two books about butterflies. And I think there are butterflies of every state, but what is great about this particular book is it's organized by color. So you see it right there. So if you see a butterfly that looks brown, you just look in the brown section. And if you see a butterfly that's blue, etc. So this is a very usable guide, whereas I have my Florida Audubon guide. That one isn't as, get in, get out. But they have these, I believe, for every state. There's also a series out of, I believe this is University of Florida. I am not sure, but either way, it's a Florida Fabulous series. These would be great gifts. So this is Florida Fabulous Butterflies, but they also have Florida Fabulous mammals, orchids, whatever. And I would encourage you also to shop local to get these. But this is a book with beautiful images, absolutely stunning images, completely readable. And here is an image of the Sierra Madre supposed to be going instead of Dellarobia's house. I mean, just look at them blanketed on this, looks like a pine tree. Yeah. Or Oyamels, I forget what the proper name of them is. And, the whole stages of reproduction.
Oh, wow.
It is so magnificent to watch. And if you get up close to a monarch caterpillar who's munching on the proper milkweed, you can hear them crunching. I kid you not. I have heard it. You hear, oh my goodness, it's loud. Then you're like, that's all you hear. Of course, you have the plant right here, like a total nerd, but to hear them crunching the leaf, okay, that's it. Like, how much happier do you need to be, right? I just so wonderful. So I will wrap by just telling you a little bit about monarchs and butterflies in symbols and myths, because we have those two elements with Julia, Ovid's wife, who is the folklorist, and Josephina's family, because she refers to the butterflies as souls, right? Children, of children. It's so beautiful. In Native American culture, you will find butterflies painted on Hopi, I think they're called Kachina dolls.
Yes.
Okay, Kachina dolls. And these represent hope, future abundance, health, and education. There is a butterfly dance that is done in the Hopi tradition as a petition for rain, good health, long life for all living things. The butterfly is associated with sleep and dreaming. Sometimes the Blackfoot culture decorate cradles with butterflies by embroidering a butterfly on a small piece of buckskin and tying it to the crib or into the baby's hair for a good night's sleep. In Christianity, the butterfly is a symbol of foretelling, spiritual transformation. And in Catholicism specifically, butterflies represent rebirth. There is a religious practice called angel numbers, and butterflies are, and in their theory, their beliefs, they suggest that symbols and numbers are sent from divine beings. So they believe the butterflies come from a divine being to help you navigate life. Okay. The idea of the monarch as being sacred or culturally important for the Mexican or Mesoamerican culture go way back to pre-Columbian Mesoamerican times. Going back to 200 AD, butterflies are seen on stamps, headdresses, nose rings, frescoes, ceramics, breastplates. If you've been on a cruise, you may have gone to Chichen Itza, and there are butterflies on those temple walls. They're also on blankets and in jewelry. They represent the spirits of fallen warriors and important figures, or simply the spirits of ancestors returning to visit their families. You may be familiar with the holiday Dia de Muertos, which celebrates your lost ones, your lost loved ones. And the monarch butterfly is also a symbol there. So that's all I have to say about flight behavior. And I am so glad to be with you to discuss this incredible book. If you haven't had enough and you're in Jacksonville, I'll be doing this again tonight at 6:30 at San Marco Books and More. And I can't wait. Next month, we will be discussing The House in Paris by Elizabeth Bowen. Now, if you do not know who Elizabeth Bowen is, you can say thank you right now, because she's amazing. And another author that kind of flew under the radar, and I feel it is my job to put her on the Zoom bar and the YouTube bar and let people know about this incredible author. So that's The House in Paris by Elizabeth Bowen.